let's return now to our lead story, which is the tax working group's recommendations for a comprehensive capital gains tax covering land, rental properties, holiday homes, most shares and business assets. But that is not the whole list in the two-volume report of nearly 200 pages. It's complicated. I asked Finance Minister Grant Robertson, why not keep it simple and just tax the second home?
One of the things we've got to do now is work through the packages and decide whether we want to take some or all of them. And I think that's a really important point here. The working group itself have pointed out to us, this is not a straitjacket. We can mix and match. We can phase things in. So there is the opportunity to do exactly as you say. I'm interested by the fact that all 11 members of the working group did come to the conclusion that there does need to be an extension around residential rental properties. That's something we'll take into account. Equally, 8 members of the group wanted to go significantly further. We've got to work our way through those things, but there's no sort of zero-sum game here. The ability is there for the government to choose part of this package, and obviously you think about what any money generated might be used for as well.
So given that there was 100% agreement on the second houses, is that a sort of a must-have, do you think?
I wouldn't call it a must-have. I just think it's interesting that a group of 11 people who we put together did decide all together that was something that they believe should happen. We'll take that into account, but clearly, we've got a very significant report with 90-odd recommendations in it to work through.
But you don't come to it with no ideas at all. You come to it with some thoughts already, so I'm just wondering.
I come to it with many thoughts,
Were you thinking on this?
I come to it with many thoughts, but I'm the Minister of Finance in a coalition government, and my job now is to sit down with our coalition partner, our confidence and supply partner, and come to some consensus. Everybody in this scenario has their own views. Everybody in this scenario has made comments in the past about these issues. From my perspective, though, my job now is a very specific one, which won't be helped by me idly speculating on which aspects of the package we might or might not take up.
Well, I was asking you to speculate in an informed way rather than idly. But anyway, you mentioned these conversations with your coalition partner and confidence and supply, Winston Peters. You've had some conversations with him in broad themes in terms of this report. So what's your pitch to get him on board with this?
Oh no, my pitch is that we set up this tax working group in order to make sure we have the fairest possible tax system, that we've got a good balance in the tax system.
That's the pitch for the report, Minister. That's the pitch for the report. So you've got the report now, and now you're going to consider which bits you want. And if you want any of it, you need Winston Peters on board. So what's your argument to get Winston Peters over the line with the legislation?
Yeah, I'm not approaching it the way that you're suggesting. What I'm approaching it is to sit down with New Zealand First and Winston Peters and talk about the principles that we went about setting the group up with and how we achieve the best system for New Zealand. So, it's not a matter of me trying to get him over the line on a particular thing. It's a matter of all of us coming together and saying we've got an opportunity here to improve the New Zealand tax system. Again, the working group said, by and large, the New Zealand tax system's good, but there's gaps and there are unfairnesses within the system. Our job now is to say, well, okay, we've got the report. What can we come together on and agree on?
Yeah, and the cold hard reality is you need his vote, and he has previously not been that keen on capital gains tax, and in fact recently he talked about farmers. He is not keen particularly on farmers having to face capital gains tax on their land. What undertakings have you given him about that?
Well, no, I heard him very clearly today in Parliament say that he was speaking there specifically about the fact that for a lot of farms, they stay within a family. And he was saying, they shouldn't be concerned about any of the proposals here because if it stays within the family, it stays within the family. So he was speaking specifically about that. More generally, though, Lisa, Minister Peters, New Zealand First and the Green Party all want to engage constructively with us because we have a report that says to us there are gaps in the system here. There are people paying tax on some forms of income and other people not paying tax on the forms of income they get. We now have to work through how far we can go with that.
I get that, but there are going to be some points of contention, and Winston Peters is very well invested in the position of the farmers. So would you be prepared to exempt farms from capital gains tax in order to get New Zealand First support for any legislation that you need to get through?
We haven't got to that point in any discussions that we're having, but I would repeat the point I made earlier.
So an exemption is still on the table then? You wouldn't rule an exemption out?
We're not ruling anything in or anything out, but if you let me finish, what I was going to say is the working group itself have said we can take aspects of their report. We are not bound to take the whole proposal on capital income or capital gains, as we're not bound to take the whole proposal on tax cuts that they're also proposing. The main thing we've got to do here is think of this as a whole package, and the fact is that it offers us a lot of options, and we now have to work out which ones we will or won't take up.
Yeah, and I'm just exploring some of those options with you, so it's not completely out of the realm.
A little bit ahead of where we're at, Lisa.
It's not completely out of the realm that you could exempt farmers in order to get New Zealand First support. You're not ruling that out.
No, I'm not ruling it out or ruling it in. The point I'm making is it is possible to use the report, and the working group themselves say this, to be able to say any tax we bring in might apply to some asset classes and not other asset classes. Absolutely, that's possible, but we're not at that stage in our discussions at the moment.
Because this, as we mentioned, is about fairness, and it's been pointed out to me that some accountant in Parnell could own a $5 million house, and that's the residence that they reside in primarily, so they don't have to pay capital gains tax. But a farmer who's living on a property that's worth about the same amount, well, they would have to pay capital gains on everything beyond the immediate land around their house. How's that fair?
Well, that's because the reason why that situation exists is because we made a very clear decision not to include the family home. And I think most New Zealanders support that decision because we know New Zealanders aspire to home ownership. We aspire to having strong, stable communities, and we made a clear decision about that.
But can you see how that's inherently unfair? Can you see how that's inherently unfair just because the $5 million house is the primary residence?
Yeah. But just to be really clear, that the family home on a farm is exempted. What would be included if we were to do it, and it's still an if, is that the working group is recommending that the business part of the farm could be applied if it was sold, and the capital gain in the future from whenever we pass any legislation would be included. So it's not an apples with apples comparison, but ultimately this is based on the fact that we are not going to include the family home in any regime if we were to go there.
I know you've got to get on a plane soon, so let's get through these last ones quickly. Some people would argue this rather weighty report should have a different title. It should be the Guide to a One-Term Government. So are you prepared to forego a second term and push this capital gains thing into legislation?
I think it's responsible for the government to face up to the big issues that face New Zealand. We're not prepared to hide away from the fact that we've got a tax system which the working group has identified some gaps in. Our tax system's pretty good overall, but we shouldn't shy away from addressing issues that are fundamental to the fairness of our tax system.
So that's a yes, isn't it? You're prepared to bet a second term on capital gains tax?
No, that's not what I said. We haven't made any decisions on that. The point is we are prepared to face up to these issues, have a conversation with New Zealanders about them. We haven't made our final decisions, but I think hiding away from important issues to New Zealanders isn't a way of being a good government.
Aren't you hiding away, though? Because Labour has supported a capital gains tax, and your leader, our Prime Minister, has repeatedly talked about creating a fairer New Zealand and a fairer tax system. So if you don't do this, then you're all talking no trousers, aren't you?
Look, we've put it together, this group. That's the good and responsible thing to do. We're in a coalition government. We now work through what's possible inside that government. I think New Zealanders understand how that works and the system that is MMP that brings us that. What we've done is made sure we're bringing a really big issue to the table and making a call on it. I think that is the responsible thing to do.
What you're doing is hedging your bets, really, isn't it?
No, what we're doing is being part of a coalition government and finding a consensus position. Our parties represent the majority vote in the last election, and so we are getting together to see what we can agree on. That is the system we've got, and that's the process that we're a part of right now.
And that was Finance Minister Grant Robertson, who was racing to catch a plane.